Every child ever born was sentenced to suffer. Some will face heartbreak. Some will fall into poverty. Some will be tormented by their own minds. And in the end, all will die. What if the only way to stop this cycle was to never be born at all? This is the foundation of antinatalism, a controversial philosophy that questions the very act of giving birth. It argues that life is a prison sentence that no one consents to, and the only way to stop the cycle is to never create life at all. Is this a disturbing truth we refuse to accept, or just extreme pessimism? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear may change the way you see existence itself. Most people assume life is a gift, but antinatalists argue the opposite, that existence is a burden we force onto others without their consent. One of the most famous antinatalist philosophers, David Benatar, puts it simply: while the presence of pain is bad, the absence of pleasure is not bad, unless someone is deprived of it. Since a person who never exists can't be deprived, non-existence is preferable to existence. Let's break this down. If you're born, you will suffer. That's guaranteed. If you're never born, you'll never suffer. If you're never born, you won't miss happiness, because you won't exist to care. Therefore, non-existence is the better option. Sounds extreme? Maybe. But let's take a look at history, because antinatalism isn't as new as you think. While the term antinatalism is modern, the idea has been around for thousands of years. Buddhism, 5th century BC, the Buddha taught that life is filled with suffering, dukkha, and the ultimate goal is liberation, escaping the cycle of birth and rebirth, samsara. Some Buddhist sects viewed birth as a tragedy. The Gnostics, 2nd century AD, a group of early Christians who believed the world was created by an evil god, demiurge. They saw birth as a trap, keeping souls in a corrupt world. Arthur Schopenhauer, 19th century, the German philosopher who argued that human desire creates suffering. His solution? Suppress desire, avoid reproduction, and minimize suffering as much as possible. So if history is filled with thinkers who warned against life, why do we keep having children? For most of history, having children has been seen as necessary, sacred, and even a duty. Many reject antinatalism because, at its core, it challenges some of our deepest biological, cultural, and emotional instincts. To begin with, there's the simple fact that we are wired to reproduce. Evolution favors those who pass on their genes, and the survival of our species has always depended on new generations being born. Even if someone rationally agrees with antinatalism, the instinct to have children often outweighs any philosophical argument. Beyond biology, religion has also played a powerful role. Many of the world's major faiths teach that bringing life into the world is not just a natural act, but a divine responsibility. Christianity commands believers to be fruitful and multiply. Genesis 1 verse 28, while Islam considers children to be a blessing from Allah. Hinduism, too, sees family life as an essential stage of a person's spiritual journey. In these traditions, life is viewed as a gift, not a burden. To refuse to have children is often seen as rejecting God's plan. But even outside of religion, there are strong social and emotional reasons why people dismiss antinatalism. Many people fear dying without a legacy, and for them, children provide a sense of meaning and continuity. Others believe that despite life's difficulties, the joy, love, and beauty of existence outweigh the suffering. And then, of course, there's the simple fact that the idea of existence being bad feels unnatural. We are creatures built to survive, to push forward no matter what. Questioning the value of life itself is uncomfortable, almost unthinkable for most people. But what if all of this is just wishful thinking? What if we keep having children simply because our ancestors never questioned it? If we strip away tradition, instinct, and personal bias, is there any logical reason to keep the cycle going? For many, life is a miracle, But for others, it is a cycle of suffering disguised as a gift. Antinatalists argue that no matter how much happiness one experiences, the reality of pain, loss, and inevitable death makes existence fundamentally cruel. To begin with, suffering is unavoidable. No one asked to be born, yet every person is forced to endure illness, heartbreak, aging, and ultimately death. Even those with privileged lives will eventually face grief, disappointment, and the fear of the unknown. Philosopher David Benatar, in his book Better Never to Have Been, argues that life operates on an asymmetry. The absence of suffering is always good, but the absence of pleasure is never bad for someone who does not exist. In other words, while bringing a child into the world exposes them to potential suffering, not bringing them into the world harms no one. But the cruelty of life is not just personal, it's systemic. Look at history. Wars, genocides, slavery, and oppression have shaped civilizations. Even today, billions of people struggle under poverty, violence, and social injustice. If suffering is so deeply woven into human existence, can we really justify continuing the cycle? Then there's the indifference of nature itself. The world is not designed for human happiness. It is a chaotic system where survival depends on competition, violence, and luck. From predatory animals devouring their prey to natural disasters wiping out entire communities, the universe shows no mercy. If existence is filled with inevitable pain, and if suffering far outweighs joy for so many, is it ethical to create more life just because we can? Or are we merely prisoners of biological programming, tricking ourselves into believing life is worth living? If life is truly as painful as antinatalists claim, then why do so many people choose to live and even find meaning in their struggles? While antinatalism presents a strong case against reproduction, critics argue that it oversimplifies the human experience and ignores key aspects of existence. First, suffering is not the whole story. While pain is inevitable, so is joy, love, and fulfillment. Throughout history, humans have endured immense hardship yet still created breathtaking art, explored the universe, and formed deep emotional connections. If suffering alone was enough to make life meaningless, why do people continue to fight for their dreams, build families, and find purpose? Another major counterargument is that meaning is subjective. What one person sees as a pointless struggle, another sees as an opportunity for growth. Existentialist thinkers like Albert Camus argue that even though life may not have an inherent purpose, we can still create our own. In the myth of Sisyphus, Camus suggests that life's absurdity doesn't mean we should despair, but rather embrace the challenge of living fully. Additionally, critics point out that antinatalism assumes suffering is always worse than non-existence. But can we really know that? Many people who experience severe hardships still say they would rather have lived than never existed at all. Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, argues that even in the face of unbearable suffering, humans can find purpose through love, hope, and personal growth. And then there's the argument that life is constantly improving. Thanks to science, medicine, and social progress, human beings suffer far less than they did in the past. Infant mortality has dropped, life expectancy has increased, and we continue to solve problems once thought impossible. To some, antinatalism underestimates humanity's ability to overcome suffering and create a better future. So, is life a cruel mistake or a canvas for meaning? Are we trapped in a cycle of suffering, or are we capable of transforming our world for the better? Maybe, in the end, the answer is not absolute, but a matter of perspective. If this video made you think, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.